Today's guest is Jeremy Curtis. Jeremy is a commissioning specialist who's worked all over the world, particularly in the data center space. And he's also the founder of constructandcommission.com, one of the most widely read online resources for commissioning engineers globally. In this conversation, Jeremy shares his journey from plumbing apprentice to global consultant, his experience building teams in Hong Kong, and his mission now with CX Systems to tackle the skills gap through better training and knowledge sharing. We talk commissioning, we talk culture, we talk data center demand, and we even touch on his former alter ego, Bob Morris. There's a ton of insight here for anyone in construction, engineering, or just interested in how people build meaningful careers in complex, high-pressure environments. Let's get into it.
You made some bold moves in your career. You've traveled, you've run businesses independently, you've traveled or based yourself in Asia. Looking back, what's shaped those choices?
I think just circumstances and opportunities. So I think at the start of my career, obviously most people just fall into construction. I fell into like a little plumbing company. Then after that, somebody would move within that plumbing company. Somebody moved to another company that I then kind of followed them after a year. Then get into relationships with girls and things like that. So that's where the travel to Australia kind of came from. So we bought a house in the late 90s that obviously back then the house prices went up. The house was £46,000. So
yeah, was it in odds, is this?
No, in the UK. Yeah. So down south. And then I think we sold the house because we were like, right, we go for a travel. So we went to Australia. And then we got back from Australia after about 10 months. And I pretty much got a job back with one of the old businesses I worked with. And then what do they call it? The Australia curse kicks in. So you split up with the girl that you went to Australia with. And after that, to be fair, kind of just bobbled along. I quite enjoyed the project because it's more project management than sort of mechanical project manager. So I sort of bobbled along. Then I went to New Zealand. I think that was one of the biggest changes. I went to New Zealand for a holiday and I met this woman in this youth hostel that was telling me about this truck trip she did through Africa from Cairo all the way to Cape Town, right? And it was only just sat on a veranda type thing, just having a discussion.
Mm.
And that kind of just sparked my head. So then I went off, got back home, booked a trip 2 years later, like on this truck. And then saved up to do that. And then basically from there, I just ended up traveling around for 18 months, come back. And that's where I got the job in kind of data centers with a big construction company here. And then I ended up basically just sitting around sort of doing project management. But it was sort of just this bobbling along, wasn't really that interested in it and things like that. So
what year is this roughly? What sort of period?
That was 2000. So traveling, I think, was 2006, 7. So I got back in the financial crisis. That was a great time to get back in. So yeah, that would have been around 2013. So I was there about 5 years, I think, with that company. And then 2013 or 2012, I just had lunch with this guy that was telling me, like, I was, going through some stuff. We were working at Heathrow Terminal 2, and he was just having a chat. And I said to him, I'm a bit bored. And he said, why don't you go and do commissioning? And I was like, I've never done it. Why would I want to do that? And he was like, no, I think you'll be okay at it. And he goes, I know some guys in Hong Kong that are looking for like commissioning. So those guys sort of flew through, sort of Heathrow. They were sort of doing business in the UK, met up with them, and then ended up in Hong Kong.
Had you been to Hong Kong before?
Yeah, I went when I was backpacking. Hated it. Yeah, it was a very.
But so you're sitting there thinking, right, okay, yeah, Hong Kong, yeah, been there, done that, and now you're going to go and work there.
Yeah, I didn't. I honestly, but I think the thing there is, I was like going through Africa, then I go through India, spent 6 months in India, backpack in India, then Thailand, Laos. So it's very different countries, right? Different cultures, and then you land in Hong Kong. And I was, when I was backpacking India, I think I was living on £250 a month. And that was everything all in: travel, food, accommodation.
Wow.
And then you land in Hong Kong, and it's like, I think it was 15 quid or 20 quid something to do the train from the airport into Central, and I'm like, no way. And then ended up in a place called Chun Kun Mansions, which is a very famous building in Hong Kong. I think most people that have lived there will know Chun Kun Mansions. It's not a great place to go. So within there, there's a lot of backpackers, right, in these tiny little areas up in the top of it. I mean, if there was a fire in there, it'd been horrific. So yeah, I think it was just a different culture, a different experience going to Hong Kong. So yeah, but now, I got there to Hong Kong, ended up basically working for Comtech for 3 years, and then went out on my own. Um, then back into employment, obviously now back out on my own. So I don't think it's really any major plan. I think it's just sort of circumstances and opportunities arrive that, as long as you make the right decision, there's many that come that you don't want to make the decision on, but seems to all worked out. So yeah, that's
What was you mentioned there, so you worked for, do you say Comtech?
yeah, Comtech, yeah.
For 3 years, then you went on your own for roughly the same period, 3 years, and then you went back at MV5. Is that where you ended up before you've gone? But now
Yeah, so I came from UK to Hong Kong with Comtech Asia. So,
yeah,
and then I worked with them for 3 years. So did a couple of data centers and then worked on a big casino in Macau, which is the big kind of gambling area of Asia.
yeah,
I think what I discovered when I was kind of working, and Hong Kong's a bit of an interesting place, right? Because I think in London, when you're working for somebody and you're working for these businesses, you don't really socialize with VPs or directors or CEOs and things like that.
you're very standoffish.
Not standoffish. I just don't think you get into those sort of situations. You're kind of just, you're project manager, and you go do your job, you go home. I mean, back in those days, I don't even think I took the laptop home, right? And things like that. So it's a very, very different working time. But I think what I learned when I landed in Hong Kong was there's a community of people that are all kind of in the same environment, right? We've all flown in, we're all working there, and some have got families, some have been there for 20 or 30 years, you've just arrived and things like that. But the community's quite welcoming. And then what you're doing is you're kind of making a lot of different connections with, people that, in my eyes, coming from the environment I did in London, you're out drinking with and partying and having coffees with people that are very, very high up in certain businesses. You get like the local Hong Kongers are very, very welcoming, and they're brilliant people, great to work with. Yeah, so when I was with Comtech, 3 years left because I saw the opportunities with a lot of the local contractors, because they have a very different way of doing business in Hong Kong and across Asia, very different culture, very, very different than the way the UK would do it. But they had a lot of Western clients. So what I saw was I could go in, help them, and be the interface between their engineers that are very, very good. I mean, don't get me, they're very, very good engineers, and the Western expectations, because there can be a very big gap. It can be very different.
When you say gap, do you mean as in Western expectations are higher than what would be generally expected in Hong Kong, or is it the other way? Like, what's the gap like?
I think back in that time, like 2013, it was probably higher. So you'd have a big Western or American data center company that would come in, like a co-location data center. They would build or refurb a building into a data center in Hong Kong, but they turn up with all their processes. They would turn up with all their expectations and deliverables and things like that. And yeah, what I noticed was when I was working on the client side for like Comtech, what I noticed was that they are very, very good technically, but they kind of, and their culture and the way that they do business is very different. So, you've got the Americans and the UK guys coming in, bit more aggressive, bit more demanding, expectations, want things a very different way and things like that. So yeah, I just kind of I just thought, well, if I can go in and get a couple of clients, and then sit between them and their client, and sit in meetings, and then understand that culture and how the Western side are expecting things to be done, and be that sort of conduit between, the contractor and them. And yeah, so I did that for 8 years. It was great, really, really enjoyed it. But then obviously COVID hit, and COVID was, I mean, everyone thinks Hong Kong was pretty bad. We couldn't fly in and out, but as going around and doing what we need to do, it was fine. But there was also a lot of, obviously had the restrictions and things, but COVID was an extremely busy time, I think, for a lot of people. They were still building. People can't fly in, so there was a lot of pressure on the resources that was already there. I ended up doing, working a lot during COVID, like 7 days a week, 18-hour days and things like that. But then when COVID finished, it kind of just all went a little bit mute. And Hong Kong has obviously, the economy there has changed a bit, and things like that. So work sort of dropped off. Pricing became a lot more focused, because before it wasn't really, okay, it's a focus, but not the main focus of pricing. So contractors could afford to employ external people.
Is that because once the travel restrictions were lifted after COVID, then the resource outside of the region was available, and therefore obviously there is more resource available to service the demand, and more supply, so demand goes down, sort of thing?
No, I think it was just kind of COVID finished, and then also there was a change within kind of the way Hong Kong was doing their projects. I think it kind of just coincided together. Yes, there was obviously, it was more open, there was more people, but also the Asia kind of obviously opened up with the data center markets and things like that. And what you understand is Hong Kong were building data centers like 2005, 2000, like way before a lot of the other Asian countries like Thailand and Malaysia and those sort of places got on the map with data centers, which is pretty recently, right? So Hong Kong, if you look at Hong Kong, they have massive amounts of data centers that were built over the last 20 years, let's say. So I think it just sort of all coincided. There was obviously the economy, I think, kind of backed off. You didn't get the pressure from external forces. The housing market dropped. So I think just that all sort of together just meant that there wasn't much opportunity necessary for me to go and do what I want to do as a full time in that sense. And I think also what I learned was during those times I enjoyed working with the young engineers, and I enjoyed that. So I kind of made the decision that MV5 kind of rang me up one day and said, go for a coffee. Had a chat with them. And what they said wanted to do and things was, it's kind of right up my alley, what I was kind of had in my head. So decided then, yeah, I'll stop what I was doing, work kind of backed off, kind of stopped all my projects, and then moved over.
That was into a leadership role, though. You were a fairly, you were a director there, right?
Yeah, so I went in as like a regional role, and then also to help build up the Hong Kong team, because the Hong Kong's a bit of it's a strange place for commissioning. If you go to Singapore and you go to that part of Asia, there's a lot of commissioning businesses down there, but Hong Kong is only pretty much two. If you call commissioning businesses, there's only two. So the resource pool in Hong Kong, you don't have like all these different businesses where you can go and get, you put a job advert out and somebody from a business that maybe you don't even know of applies. That doesn't really happen. So the young engineers are, they come in as graduates, and then, try and obviously train those guys up. But with I think my main role at MV5 was to try and build the Hong Kong team, because the issue obviously is the resource pool, the resource skill set. And I think with what's going on in the market, there's a lot of seniors being taken out of that resource pool. So the juniors need to step up.
What's going on in the market there, Jeremy? Sorry, just to touch on that, you mentioned about the leaders being taken out. What's causing that?
I think just the overall demand for commissioning engineers or commissioning, managers, and especially ones with a lot of experience. Before, clients would just, let's say, employ a commissioning consultant, get on, do the job, um, just allow them to deliver what they deliver, and then that's it. Give us the final report, and thank you very much. Now I think clients are taking more of an active role because of what they need to prove internally. A lot of these businesses are very big, they're global organizations, they're trying to deliver the same quality. So those businesses what I can see is those businesses that weren't there necessarily before with a massive expectation for the resource are now employing a lot of resources, which are taking the experienced guys out of the consultancies. So there's this kind of in I think it's around globally. I don't think it's just down in Asia. There's this kind of, we call it the skills gap, right? But I think it's more that senior leadership gap. There's lots of graduates, there's lots of young engineers, and but it's that kind of 8, 10, 12 year experienced engineer that they're there, but they just don't work in those levels anymore to deliver projects. They're working more up inside the client teams.
Well, that creates an issue there, doesn't it? That sort of skills gap, if we want to call it that. The young engineers that are coming through, the information that these senior people have isn't being necessarily filtered down to them because they're not in a position where they can learn from them. Which, I mean, does that risk watering down the quality of the engineering there?
I think for what we see, the graduates generally and the younger engineers are technically good. They're technically very, very good. It's more probably like what you're saying, it's more down to the experience of running a project, interacting with people, soft skills, understanding within commissioning, the whole process, being able to write documentation, being able to write test scripts. I think that's where the big hole is. It's not, if you sit them down and say, how does X, Y, and Z work? They can generally explain how it works. They've all got, in Asia, they're very well qualified. They've all got, degrees, or most of them have got master's degrees and things like that. So technically they're very, very good. It's just the other side of it, which is what you're saying. I think when we all grew up in, late 90s, early 2000s, we had these, what we called old, they're probably like 35, 40-year-old people, guys, right? That we were put into into work with those guys with not a lot of expectations. It was like, just go work with them, suck their information out, get their knowledge. Just, if they want tea, make tea. If they want drawings folded, fold drawings. If they want you to go on site and do stuff, do that. But overall, they're kind of like, I guess, a bit like Karate Kid, right? With scrub on, scrub off. Over time of doing that, you kind of learn. Strangely, you didn't realize you were learning, but I think you learn. You sit in meetings, you've got a massive, very experienced people. Whereas I think now the young engineers are expected to come in and very quickly hit the road running, but they can't really, because they don't have that environment where they've got, they've learnt in. So
that waterfall of knowledge, I think, is key across industries. And I'm trying to rack my brains to think of an industry where it wouldn't be useful or just needed. But we spoke before we hit record about early working life and my time in the legal industry, and the job that I did, you didn't need really any qualifications. There was no degree in what I did, clerking. It was, you had to have fairly decent GCSEs and, know someone in the industry, and you got in, right? And I started work at 16 in the city, working for barristers, liaising with solicitors, court staff. And it was tough because I was, still a kid and I didn't really know what was going on. I had sort of, maybe half a brain cell, but that was about it. And it still is quite traditional. I mean, the industry, the clerking industry is changing somewhat, and they are sort of leaning towards, you requiring higher education. So degrees or whatever. But the mantra of learn on the job is still very much that. And, you know, you go in and you are effectively learning from the people above you. And that is how you move up. And it's your ability to retain and action that information that you're receiving that dictates really how you move up the ladder.
Yeah, but I think also I think times have obviously, you know, they've changed. We just don't have, I don't think we have the resources, or even, to be fair, the time now, especially in the data center market. So I think what I tell a lot of the younger guys now is you need to go and self-learn. You know, you've got to go and self-learn, go to work, speak to the seniors that you have there or whatever, or even find people like outside of the business that, you know, you respect or whatever, and talk to those guys and see what you need to do. Because I think there's also, I mean, when I came to Hong Kong, I'd never done commissioning. I'd done project management, you know, building systems and things like that. I'd worked in data centers building systems, but I'd never done full-blown commissioning. And I mean, you work out how to get through it. And I think, you know, I was sat in meetings where I was on Google under the desk, right? I was doing things like that. I was like, what are they talking about? And then I kind of like sit there type. I'm the guy that's supposed to be leading the meeting, right? I mean, there's lots of stories when I kind of came here to try and do that. And what you learn is that I think, especially in, like saying, in this environment, you can't expect to be taught it. I think, yes, there's an element of teaching, but nowadays you need to be driven to go home, pull out the ASHRAE guideline or the BISRIA flushing guideline or whatever it might be, and sit there, read it, make notes, make flow diagrams of how the sequence works and how the process works, and basically create your own learning resource. And I think they, you know, that would help a lot. It helped me. And then every single day, you know, you're going into work and, right, okay, how can we make this better? What are we doing here? And then try and every day, I tell them every day, just be better, right? You just need to be better than you were yesterday. And it's not going to be massive steps. Some of it will be small steps. So, yeah, that's where the skill gap is. It's in that, I think, the senior level.
In terms of Hong Kong and UK comparisons, I'm interested to get your sort of views on this. And we've touched on it previously. But what was the biggest, what still is the biggest difference between how the UK is operating as an industry and how Hong Kong is operating? Are there any parallels there, or are we completely out of kilter with each other?
I think project-wise, they're probably the same. It's pretty much the same people, same colo guys, the same hyperscalers, the same financial banks. So I don't think there's much in the type of clients people are dealing with. Project-wise, there is a big difference because in Hong Kong, obviously, they're very high rise. So there's things that you need to think about when you're looking at certain elements because of, you know, how tall things are, and also with the data centers in Hong Kong. Hong Kong obviously used to be, strangely, one of the factories of the world, right? Years and years ago. So a lot of the old factory buildings where you'd get your Matchbox car from, you know, when you're a kid, they generally would come out of Hong Kong. So those buildings were empty. So they then convert those into data centers. The problem with that is when I was in the UK and you're working and we were into like a lot of modularization, you know, things, massive modules were turning up on trucks. And then you wheel them down corridors, put them up, the fitters would bolt them up and things like that. You can't do that in Hong Kong because we don't have the space. You don't have the lifts. The lifts, everything goes into a lift. So I think that was very different, like when you get there and how everything's still quite, I guess you'd say, manual compared to here that's very off-site manufacturing and things like that. I think the biggest difference I found was the culture. So the way that the business is done in Hong Kong and let's say Asia compared to the UK. I came out of late 90s, early 2000s, sometimes quite an aggressive environment with, very old school site managers, project managers that didn't really care what you thought or what you needed. You just had to get your job done and things like that. So you kind of learn in that environment. And then when you land in kind of Hong Kong, it was, yeah, the culture was very different. They don't really write letters. They don't write contractual stuff.
Okay.
It's all done at dinner. So you would go out, so people would go out. So if we have an issue, we would tell the client we've got this issue and this, that, and the other, because obviously we work for the client. If it was a big problem, the clients would probably go to dinner with the main contractor. They would discuss it. They would then agree what was the outcome. They come back in and say, right, we are doing this. There's nothing. This was a little, back in 2013 when I arrived. There wasn't any contractual letters. There wasn't any, any of that we have in the UK to, cover everything. And then with that, kind of, I think payments, things like that, it was all just a lot smoother, felt a lot smoother. Your word is your bond,
Yeah.
right? And if you make a word and you don't make that your bond and you go back on it, then you're destroyed. They're you're not going to survive very long there. So it's quite nice in a way, right? Because it's kind of going back to the handshake. Is that it? Yep, that's it. And then okay, everyone crack on. And in the UK, there's a very lot of claiming, a lot of, I guess, court cases and things like that. I think in 13 years or whatever it is I've been in Hong Kong, I don't think I've known one court case for construction. Everything just kind of gets sorted out. So that was very different. And meetings and coming from quite an aggressive background in, like construction in the UK, uh, coming from that going in, it took me a long time. I'll be honest, it took me about 2 years to learn that the Hong Kongers will not react if you shout. They don't. They just go quiet, just let you talk, and then they leave, and not a lot will happen. So it's very different management. Nice way. It's a nice way of doing it, I think. But yeah. So I think that's the main differences that I found when I landed there.
What are you? So you're CX Systems, right? Now this is your
Yeah.
company.
Mm.
Talk to us about that. What is CX Systems? What are you setting out to do?
So obviously since leaving MV5, the plan is for CX Systems is to try and take these, because when I was at MV5, I part of my job that I really, really loved was working with the young engineers. Absolutely loved it. I could spend all day just sat talking to them, showing them stuff and, and seeing what they're doing and trying to make it better for them and things like that. So for CX Systems, it's very early stages. I'm still kind of swilling stuff around in my head and things like that. But I think ultimately I want to move more into the training because I think that's where there would be a lot of benefit. I want to try and kind of, create environments for individuals or even businesses, client side, even clients that, need to deploy training and things like that. So my vision right now is trying to become like a training business, which I think initially would be more physical, not physical, but more present. So go around businesses and do it, and then eventually try and move it into more online kind of platforms and things like that. Because I do think that with commissioning, it's not difficult. I think everybody makes it very, very difficult because everyone kind of takes a very standard process and then wants their viewpoint into it, and then another guy puts their viewpoint into it, and before you know it, you've got the same process and outcome, but different ways of delivering it. So it's not a difficult process to do. I think the issue is that when the young engineers and the graduates start, they're not trained from day one on this. It is a process. It's a box to box process. whatever project we go to, it's the same deliverables, it's the same responsibilities, you know. So hopefully in the future it will end up onto this like a platform type environment, but initially I think it's going to be more sort of going around and educating people on commissioning and then training the engineer, try and train the engineers more on process. I'm not at the moment. I don't think I want to looking to get into on-site, testing of equipment, because I think that's just a whole different ball game that could go on for, you'd never solve that in years based on everybody's opinions. But I see the issue is the process. They don't have, and the process would make them a lot more, I think, efficient if they could come in and just run it.
So you're doing your bit there for the skills gap, right? Presumably this is over in Hong Kong.
Well, Hong Kong, yes, but I don't think it needs to be. It will only be Hong Kong. I think there's a lot of demand around Asia, around Europe, around America. But I think initially, yeah, like it will be centering around the Asia market. Once you get to an online situation, I mean, the world's your oyster, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
it's and with that, the construct and commission, what I've seen with that and how that's worked and how that's helped people and the feedback I get from that. Yeah, definitely, because I think that we just need to. There's not any. You can't go to a university. I think there's one in America, maybe, right? But commissioning is a career. Commissioning is a skill set. Commissioning is a niche. Commissioning knowledge is very separate than design knowledge, than construction knowledge, and things like that. Yet there's not any. There's no university, in Hong Kong, anywhere where you go and it's like, oh, there's a commissioning course. It's a commissioning degree. There's not that. It's a bolt-on to a standard building services design kind of degree. So yeah, I think it would be. I think the young engineers would find it useful. I think you can even upskill the older engineers with it. So yeah, that's the plan. Try and create that type of environment.
Constructioncommission.com. You mentioned it there briefly. Tell us about that.
So it's a website that I think I say to people it's a resource that I wish I had when I started, but I couldn't ever find. And it didn't start off as construct and commission. It was, strangely, it started off as a hiking website, but not that name, obviously, right? So the wife had this idea that, oh, let's do it, because Hong Kong, with Hong Kong, people don't realize the biggest activity in Hong Kong is hiking, right? It's got some of the most stunning scenery. It's got some of the most stunning beaches and things like that. So
whenever I think of Hong Kong, I just think of high rises.
No. 75% of Hong Kong is national park. It's some of the areas you go to, you can walk, you won't see people for hours. It's stunning, absolutely stunning, right? But you've got to kind of get into it to go and see it. So we and especially in COVID. So COVID was, everyone's out hiking, pretty much the only main activity you could do. So the wife decided one day, let's set up a hiking website. I'm like, why do you want to do that? Oh, I think it would be good, And we didn't really know much about websites or anything like that. So it mainly was, well, we'll set up one, but you're going to do it. So I set one up just on some rubbish like WordPress thing and this, that, and the other. But then I very fast realized that to do an article or to, do a how-to of hiking, you had to go and do the hike, which was like 8-10 hours to hike. Then you come back, then you got to write the article. So it wasn't very viable from a financial point of view or anything like that. So, but what I did learn in that was I learned how to set up a website. And then I thought, well, I wonder if I just set this construct and commission up or a website for commissioning. So yeah, through COVID, I just set that up. And then it kind of, it just became this kind of thing that I had no expectations for it. And then I got my first click, and that was like, well, this is nuts. Somebody in America, I think it was. And then I got my first download, and I'm like, hey, really? And then over time, I've just kind of tried to make it, writing more and more articles. So it's only me. I'm the only person that's ever written in there. So, and I think it's become quite I think it's probably one of the biggest resources globally now for commissioning. It's not the best looking website; it's getting redesigned at the moment, but yeah, it's just a little thing I thought I'd do in COVID, which kind of got some traction.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for that type of resource and just trying to add value and help people. And in this day and age with quick buck and all the rest of it, people just, if you've got knowledge in an industry and you're able to just genuinely help people, I mean, if there's financial gain to be had off the back of that, great, but that's not really necessarily the reason you're doing it. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. And I make sure you visit anyone listening that's in commissioning, go and have a look, constructionandcommission.com. I've got to ask you though, Jeremy, who is Bob Morris?
Bob, yeah, right. So when I started the website, I think we're all a little bit a bit wary, right? Because you put your name on something and then you're not really sure if it, and especially in engineering, I think we can all agree that people have their own ideas of doing things and how things should be done, and so I wasn't too sure how it would be taken. And also at that time, I didn't really want to have my kind of full name on it. So I created this pen name called Bob Morris. So Bob is just Bob, I think in the UK, like it's Bob type thing, right? Morris is my mother's maiden name. So yeah, so Bob Morris became the main author and pen name of Construction Commission. It's kind of moving over now. I've done a couple of articles, I think, under my own name. But Bob even had a LinkedIn account because I started experimenting.
Yeah, you've really built it out. This person.
Yeah, because back then I kind of just sat there. LinkedIn, obviously, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I think LinkedIn was very different than it is now. I think it felt a lot more open. It was a lot more lighter in a sense of like posting and doing things, but kind of I find construction stuff in LinkedIn can be quite like vanilla. It's just very, very kind of bit old in the sense, right? So Bob decided to launch his own LinkedIn profile, and then to kind of like test a few things, to maybe put some memes in and kind of take the mickey a little bit out of the industry or whatever it is. And also keep it away from my name in a sense. And yeah, he did quite well. He was shut down. I think I shut him down a couple of years ago, but he did pretty well in LinkedIn. And even now I get guys coming into mine and then they're like, "You constructing community?" Yeah. Who's Bob then? Oh, it's me. And he's like, and they're like, "Really?" Like, yeah. He goes, "But I know you." Right. And the other reason that I retired him off is because again, like with the website and with doing that sort of thing, you're not really sure how it's going to go, right? I could have just bombed. It could have been whatever it is, but it hasn't. And what ended up happening was Bob was starting to get DMs asking Bob to go and do talks and Bob to go and do work for people.
I see.
And I couldn't sit there and say, well, I'm not really Bob. It's not Bob. It's this guy over here. So now I'm kind of more involved, as it were. I think it's on, my profile as like writer or founder or something. So, because I see the opportunity there, right, where I can go, you can go and do talks, you can go and do stuff with different people and things, because it'd just be a bit weird explaining to somebody who Bob's not Bob.
Yeah, it's a bit of it's a hurdle, isn't it? Like having to just, and then I suppose there's an element of what is this person going to think of me once I've told them? Is this going to ruin all the good work I've done?
Yeah, but also, Jason, Bob was getting offered work, right? So can you write me? Can you do this? Can you do that? And then I'm like, well, how do I now?
How do I take this?
Yeah, well, back in then, I've always had CX systems, right? And I'm like, well, that's going to be a bit of a weird conversation to explain to them. They need to pay this other business. So, yeah, so I think then I just decided to, Bob gets retired, and then just go under my own steam, especially since I'm now on my own. I'm able to kind of do it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
What I want to glean from you, Jeremy, is sort of, I want to focus a bit on data centers. Obviously, we've spoken about it a lot, and we've spoken about your career and stuff. But I'll be the first to say, data centers commissioning, I know of it. I know roughly what happens. I understand the principle of it, but they're a very different beast compared to sort of general commercial buildings. And I'm just trying to understand, firstly, exactly what a data center is its purpose, and why it's so or treated so differently or an outlier from standard commercial buildings.
Well, obviously, the data centers allow us to use all our phones and our software and everything. Um, Kind of, it's the cloud. I guess that's what it is. It's kind of that cloud area that's not really a cloud. It's a big concrete building in Slough or somewhere. Um, the difference between, I think that, yeah, the difference between commercial and data centers, all honesty, there's no difference. There's, I think everyone thinks there is this massive, huge, oh, it's data centers, it's this and that. But when you go and you do a commercial project, you run the same process that pretty much you'll run in the data center project. I think where the kind of that difference is the focus on the commissioning. So within the commercial and kind of hospitality, it's more focused on construction, speed, delivery, handover, and then commissioning might get crammed up to, 2 weeks at the end of the job. Whereas, and that's probably because also, like, if they have a failure, right, it doesn't really, doesn't matter. They could just send the facility out, fix it. It's not really impacting their business if they have I guess it would do if they have a chill water failure, but they get over it. With the data centers, when you start a data center project, one of the first things the clients, especially the ones that are very, very experienced in building the data centers, one of the first discussions is commissioning. One of the first people they try to employ, or should employ, obviously, is the commissioning management company. So I think it's just focus. Commercial, not really a massive focus at the moment. I think it's potentially getting better. Data centers, you could argue commissioning is more of a focus than construction because they need that end product to, when it turns on, to work.
Right, I see. That was going to be my next
Yeah,
question. Why that way round?
yeah.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah, because if they go offline and they do, like some of the older ones, I mean, I was involved in some project in Hong Kong. It went offline, especially the co-location ones that are selling space to various different types of businesses. A lot of the banks will be in the colo ones and things like that. So that went offline because there was somebody threw a switch, the wiring wasn't correct, and basically took the whole cooling system out. That impact of that, which was down, I think it was down for an hour or something like that. That impact was 3 years of reworking those whole systems with multiple contract. No. It would still be online because they would get up and running, but they had to get somebody like design consultant in, basically just interrogate the whole design, the whole system, redesign it, get the contractors in, rebuild it, get the commissioning people in, re-witness it and validate it, retest it, and things like that. And even if you look at like if the data center goes offline, they have damages, and the damages can be millions, I guess millions an hour, right? Multi millions an hour. So I think that's where because the risk is a lot higher, because the impact for the data center company or whoever it is a lot higher. I think that's why the commissioning is such more of a focus than kind of the commercial.
And for these projects, is there some form of insurance in place for damages like that? Because someone's got to foot this bill, right?
Yeah, I think everybody's insured, like construction companies being insured, the designers are being insured. Um, but it's also, I guess, reputation, because that data center now will have a different type of reputation. And if you're also a global business, you can't they can't be going offline because that will impact. They've got all the international clients and things like that. So yeah, I think everything's fully insured, but when the insurance companies come in, and that's another thing with obviously the commissioning and why there's so much focus with, that's a good point you raise there actually, why there's so much focus on the commissioning is because when the insurers come in, they don't ask to see the concrete pour of the floor documentation, right? They ask to see where's all the commissioning where's all the commissioning documentation, and to an extent, they'll employ a separate commissioning consultant to come in and interrogate all of that documentation to see if it was tested, because I guess they're looking for if it was done in compliance of whatever the insurance policy is, right? So yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of reason why there's such a focus on that type of thing, which is good. It's growing the industry, and I think people, are becoming more aware of commissioning now.
One of the sticks I'm often seeing the sort of data center industry, if we can call it that, beaten with is to do with sort of sustainability, and they're, as I understand it, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but they're quite sort of resource hungry, because we've got these big these huge buildings that are effectively drawing a lot of energy and resource. And I saw an article on LinkedIn last week. It was by a guy who he's essentially a property developer here in the UK, but a lot of his homes are all environmentally friendly. It's he's not your standard house builder, right? Like, a Bellway or a Taylor Wimpey, whatever. He's really focused on the environmental impact of house building. And one of the things he mentioned in his article, and I thought it was quite interesting, is how sort of data centers can look to use the heat, etc., to reuse it in sort of community infrastructure, so it's not such a drain. Is that something that you've seen? Is it what's the sort of industry saying on that?
I don't think it's really much of what people are seeing, if we're all honest. I mean, it's a good idea, but I think if you look in America, they're building data centers very close to housing estates, which would, I guess, allow them to do, that you use that heat and stuff for the heating of the houses. But the problem is those guys don't want a data center in their back garden. And we've all got old factory buildings here, that are generating probably a lot of heat as well and things like that. It's massive. I think it's big infrastructure to spend. If you're building a new town, I mean, yeah, maybe you put a data center in there and you put some houses a couple of miles away, but you can get the infrastructure. I mean, you're never going to do that in Slough, right? Because I think there's a lot of data centers in Slough in the UK. In Hong Kong, a lot of things are on reclaimed land. So there's a data center hub in Hong Kong, where most of them are. There's probably like 3 different areas, but where the main are. And I just think to get that to get the infrastructure in to do that, it would be a lot of money, too much, a lot of money.
I suppose as well, it's one of those things that if that type of model or that type of infrastructure is going to be put in, it has to be put in at the point that data center is going in. Like you use the example there of if you're building a new town or whatever, like it's not something you can go back and retrofit because it's it's just too much. It's too much of a disturbance. But I do wonder, because the industry, just construction generally, has always been hammered. It's very resource hungry. It's this, it's that, and we're, sustainability is such a big drive in the industry. And I just wondered sort of whether that is a sort of a big consideration when it comes to data centers, and if so, sort of how it's approached. But by the sounds of it, it's something that needs to be thought about before any work is started.
Yeah, but I think there's things that the clients are trying to do within the data centers to make them more efficient. But I think mainly the problem with them is they're very constant. I guess you could say they're a very constant load, right? So it is what it is. Then they need to obviously tune the plant, tune the equipment to make sure that it's operating at absolute peak efficiency, and that's probably pretty much where you're going to get it from. Nowadays, it's more, I think there's a lot on LinkedIn, obviously, about power supplies and, trying to power these things, which is a huge huge problem. And they're saying that that could actually stop a lot of the development of the data centers. But, again, that then brings, I think countries are building a lot more coal-fired power stations and things like that. So I don't know. I think since the data center boom, I mean, it's always been happening for quite a long time, but over the last, let's say, 3-4 years, it's properly booming. I think the net zero stuff's kind of like gone out the window a little bit. I don't think there's much chat in the press about net zero. It seems to be more about like the AI and doing X, Y, and Z. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, especially with the power and stuff, what they can do. They've got these small reactors. I think that these little nuclear reactors that they can place around, but then I don't know how long that takes to get kind of certificated, and if many people want those in their back garden, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have a whole heap of issues. Yeah, yeah. And I think with that also, you've got a whole other problems with that, right? If anything happens, then what happens? But yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think, the next few years to see. Because I think the power stations, the power is years away. I think National Grid here are trying to upgrade the grid, but that's
They
like
are.
a 20-year program or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, the
yeah,
grid infrastructure is such a topic because obviously I mean, the load on it is forever growing. There are more EVs on the road, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the grid infrastructure in itself is called into question. And you mentioned their alternative means of power, but it's it's something that I wonder. You mentioned the boom there. I wonder whether the general infrastructure, I don't know about Hong Kong, but in the UK is sufficient enough to be able to keep up with the need.
I think everyone's saying it's not. Then I've seen also these companies that are starting to utilize jet engines to, yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I think we've either got to be environmentally friendly or we're not.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment there's a question. I think there's a question over how environmentally friendly it all is. But then you see, how much demand is there going to be really with it? We're building all these data centers, but I'm not sure how they work out if the demand's going to be there. So maybe they build them all and they don't need to be turned on. Maybe.
Well, this boom, and we spoke about this. How do you see it playing out? I mean, do you see it falling off a cliff? Like what? How? Because this can't the rate of growth and the rate of these data centers are going and being built, etc., and being commissioned. Like it can't continue on that trajectory, right? There has to be presumably some fall off, and then where does that leave everyone that's in that industry?
I think there's a lot of people with different, I think, opinions, and I think everyone's obviously entitled to their own opinion. At the moment, there's obviously it's major demand. I mean, everybody is fully stretched, but I think there's a lot going to hinge on who does what and who can monetize what they're doing, because there's a lot of money coming in from outside. I guess you've got all these big funds and these investment companies and things. And from what I say, and let's face it, Jason, I'm just a commission engineer, right? I just do commissioning. But from what I can see, I think in the industry, there's a lot of talk about all this needs to come online by 2030, but I don't think there's many commitments to that, right? There's no contracted obligation for companies to build this, to do this. We're still in the world of, kind of like hype. I think there's a lot of hype around the data centers. And if certain businesses don't prove that they can monetize what they've been shouting that they can monetize, and to the tune of multi billions, and probably also grow at a rate that's never been seen before in terms of turnover and cash flow. If that doesn't materialize, And I don't think it's very long. I've said, I always think like maybe 18 months, that everyone's talking 2030, but if it's not happening in 18 months time, the money can't keep coming in. You just can't keep funding sheds or, these data centers. So I think if those sort of businesses, the very, very big AI companies can't monetize, then there's going to be a problem. Because if they can't monetize based on what they've got, nobody's going to monetize. But then you see, you've got, and I don't think it's going to be a big explosion. I think, well, there could be a big explosion, but AI is still going to be there. I mean, if you look at Google and you look at Microsoft and those sort of businesses, they're building AI, and I think people are comparing those guys to other types of businesses like maybe OpenAI and those types of companies. But ultimately, all they're doing, I watch Google, I use that a lot, and Gemini, they're just bolting things into their existing platform. They don't need to sell anything,
Yeah.
right? So they're just making things more efficient. You go into Gmail now, their AI in their Gmail is amazing. You go into Google Docs and you can, there's so much you can do with the AI in there, and Google Sheets, and even their Gemini and their Notebook LM and that type of stuff. They're creating some really useful, amazing tools that they could potentially just give for free. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of different opinions.
So career professionals that potentially are looking into, and I appreciate we've just spoken potentially about a complete drop off in the industry, but that aside, because we are surmising and we're getting our crystal balls out when we talk about this, and obviously, you're, a hell of a lot than I do, but there are so many variables to this. But would you say commissioning is a good career path for someone that's coming through?
Yeah, I think like we said before, I think if commissioning is kind of treated more of as an individual type of skill set, like you're a designer, you're a project manager and things like that. I think if it's treated as a more of an individual skill set with proper training, proper courses, proper degrees and things like that, commissioning is, I think, I'll be a bit biased here, right? But I think it's one of the best careers you can do in the construction industry if you're going the building services way, right? Because, I did the project management. I then came to, coming into commissioning, I struggled for a bit on the commissioning, but that's just trying to learn. But if you've got that mindset of, quite logical, like to investigate things, like writing documents, like, talking to people, sorting issues out, sorting problems out, things like that. I think it's a brilliant career. And bolt onto the side of that commissioning, if you're good at commissioning, you can work anywhere in the world, literally anywhere in the world. And I've said this to, again, some of the younger guys that, like, if you look at a designer, yeah, they can go to the UK, they could probably go to America, they can probably go to Australia or whatever, but it'll be very difficult for them to get into that market. And it's a very different market. Maybe the codes and things like that are different than where they're coming from. If you look at it from a commissioning point of view, not only is commissioning an absolute right now in demand service, there's not enough commissioning people to facilitate the amount of work. Yeah, you can literally go and work anywhere in the world. If you say I want to go and work in America, you can probably somehow get yourself there if you can get the visas and things. And then also, I think it's relatively well paid as a profession. Again, if you can get yourself up the ranks and things like that, right now it's pretty well paid. I think different than other elements of the building services, consultancy areas like designers and things like that. So yeah, I think I love it. I think be a great career for the right type of person.
What's the best route in to that?
I think there's you see lots of different people, right? So you can see the guys that come straight from uni. You can see how they come in. You can see the guys that come in from construction, as in like they've been doing project engineering, project managing for construction companies, and then they kind of pivot into commissioning. And you can get the designers that will pivot into commissioning. So I think for the younger engineers, I think they find it a bit harder in a sense to learn because it's also a very different. I think it's just quite a different environment to be in because we're just we do things in a way that and we're employed very differently than some of the other consultancies, right? So we're employed to look after the client's interests. We're not employed to, build this, do this. We are there to look after the client's interests, to make sure that everything's working and they are getting what they paid for. So with that mindset, you've kind of got to manage a lot of different things. Your brain's got to be switching a lot. You sit in meetings, you're listening to things, and that might spark something that you need to go and look at later on. But that comes back to that whole thing earlier where we're saying that the younger engineers need to have time to
Yeah.
and not pressure, time to learn. And they will get it and if they get time, they do get it. The construction guys that come in, they generally pick it up very fast because they've already been in that environment, right? They're installing electrical systems and mechanical systems and things like that. So you generally find they come in, they pick it up very fast, but they need to learn the process. They need to learn that they're now not the contractor, right? We are now doing a different role, but the skill set they bring is very, very useful because they also understand the shortcuts that people can take when people are telling them things, read between the lines that type of thing. So contractor wise, brilliant, very, very good skill set. And generally, if you can get the choice, if you can get somebody to come from contractor and they've been a good engineer, then they usually are very, very good commissioning people. And then you've got the designers that can come in. And the designers have a very different understanding because with the contractors, they're out there doing, building. The designers you tend to find they're very good technically, but again, the process, understanding that I think sometimes that we need to take responsibility for delivering certain things that maybe not our responsibility, but gets the client what they want.
Yeah.
But generally, technically, they're very good. Like I said, the process and understanding the intricacies can take a bit of time. But yeah, I think there's many ways into the market, and even now there's people that are coming in from vendors, so UPS vendors, chiller vendors, and people like that. They can come in and they are very, very good. Obviously, because they've been working on certain pieces of equipment. If you can focus them on that equipment and things, then they are very, very good as well. So yeah, there's different avenues to come in to the industry.
Jeremy, let's bring it home. What's next on the agenda for CX Systems? Where we're going with that?
So for CX Systems is, like I said, we're working out some ideas and things like that. There's clients that we're sort of working with at the moment on some training stuff for their engineers. But yeah, in the near future, it's more about kind of developing, trying to work out the best way to do the training on the commissioning. I want to get out and also cover other elements like project managers, designers, client side, and things like that, and kind of try and do a bit of a road show to go and show those guys because they all kind of form part of the team of full commissioning. They all have responsibilities within the commissioning. Sometimes you find that them not understanding the responsibilities, they actually are doing more than what they should be. The CXA or the commissioning management company should be doing more. So I kind of want to kind of go around and do that, and then just continually sort of try and work on, the idea. Construction commission that's currently being redesigned because, that was a website that I sort of just built in the back garden. So that's getting redone, and try and continue with that and kind of add more resources to that. And then also I'm trying to, I've got idea in my head for another website for CX Systems to try and obviously link that back into what I'm doing so people have got somewhere to go. And that will also have resources, sort of tools and things like that to help the engineers and kind of create a window for what I'm going to try and do in the future. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do. It's only pretty much what date is it? It's probably day 14 maybe.
Blimey. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the moment I'm in the UK, so there's not much going on here either. So I think when I get back to Hong Kong, it's I need to head down and just get started, start talking to a lot of people and showing them what I think the industry could be doing and how it can help them.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're able to give back to the industry some of your knowledge and help people coming through. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Where can our listeners find you? You're on LinkedIn, I know that.
Yeah. So obviously LinkedIn, I can be quite busy on there. So yeah, that can see me there. Constructingcommission.com, can see me there. So but mainly I think if anyone wants to get in contact, then LinkedIn is probably the best place. Just go into the DMs. I'm in there every day, so we'll get to see it.
Well, we'll put the link in the description so the guys can find you. We'll put constructioncommission.com in there as well, and then when CX Systems is ready, we'll stick that in there. Jeremy, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for your time. You've educated me a lot on data centers, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure that our listeners will get a lot of value. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Jason.
Cheers. Speak to you soon.
Thank you. All right, bye.